Hello everyone, Crusader Studios here again, and I'm doing a more fun video this time. So, if you guys didn't know already, I made a video talking about a project I made in Little League Planet 3 called Game of Death, an asymmetrical horror level where there's one killer versus many survivors. And as I said before, in when talking about it and all that, I did bring up that there's actual lore to it. I already told you guys about the main lore of, the video, the last video when I talked about Game of Dev. Now I'm going to be talking about the lore of each of the different characters that come into the Demon's Realm. However, I'm going to be talking about the killers first before I even bother to talk about survivors. And just to make it very clear, there is so many different characters I added in Game of Dev to the point, considering this is Share Factory I'm using, Share Factory does have its limits. So I'm only going to talk about 10 killers at a time. Which means, yes, this is going to be split into multiple parts. So let's get started, shall we? Alright, the first killer that we're going to be talking about is the Smasher. Smasher's lore is quite messed up actually. Um, the Smasher was once a normal man who had a family. He had a wife and 2 children. He had pretty much a normal life until one night he was kidnapped by a cult. After getting kidnapped and taken to wherever strange place he ended up in, he was being experimented on by one of the more intelligent cult members who is fascinated with some very, very crazy stuff. The experiment did eventually lead up to the Smasher becoming, well, what he is now, an angry werewolf-like monster. So, after transforming into whatever kind of werewolf-like monster he is now, he killed off most cultists, but eventually escaped. However, he's no longer himself. Now he's a bloodthirsty, murderous psychopath. He invaded his own home, killed his wife, killed his children, and ended up killing many more people as time goes on. Until one night has happened, where he ends up discovering and encountering the demon. The demon simply captured him, and now he is trapped in the demon's realm for all eternity. That is Smasher's lore. Next up is the X-Lord, also known as my OC, Darkness. Now, Darkness was actually he actually existed around a different era, a different world, I so speak. Well, basically he lived in a different era, the Greek mythology era. However, as time went on, Darkness was slain during that era. And as, of course, we get to the modern era where Darkness actually makes his very own return. However, he wasn't fully resurrected yet until many years go by where he is fully resurrected, no longer needing to rely on a gem that is holding his soul intact. However, ever since his return when he first came back into the modern era, he was an absolute menace, trying so many things to completely take over the world. However, there was a certain hero that kept stopping him from doing so. Mike. Not only did that cause Darkness to become majorly obsessed with wanting to kill and hurt Mike, but also became obsessed with wanting to hurt Mike's allies as well, and Mike's friends. But how did Darkness end up in the Demon's Realm? How did this ex-Demon Lord from Hell get taken into the Demon's Realm? Well, it's quite simple. During a battle where Darkness was fighting against Mike in Hell, the demon got involved, captured both Darkness and Mike. Now Darkness is trapped in the Demon's Realm for all eternity, going to forcefully be able to kill all survivors without consequences, obviously. Hey, he gets to kill Mike at least, without consequences, as bad as it sounds. Slender Man. Next up, the myth, also known as the Slender Man. Slender Man is some kind of myth. Nothing is known much about him except that he resides in forests or something like that. However, How did this unknown, strange, pale, tall, faceless figure end up in the demon's realm of all things to kill the survivors? Well, there are theories that spread around saying that Slender Man willingly visited the demon's realm. Or maybe there are rumors that Slender Man was taken by the demon to come to the demon's realm. Nothing is known about Slender Man. Nothing is known of how he got taken to the demon's realm. All we know is he's now in the demon's realm, ready to not only make you fear him, but to kill you. Next killer, the Experiment, also known as Project S. Project S was once a normal lizard until he was captured by a scientist group that did many experiments on him. And of course, he was experimented in a lab that was located somewhere in Ohio. As time went on, the experiment was a success. However, things got really bad as time went on. Eventually, Project S had ended up waking up, getting extremely furious, now growing a massive hatred towards the humans and the human race as a whole. Eventually, Project S had broke out of its containment, killed many scientists in the process while escaping. Eventually, he did escape, now on his way to hunt down more people to kill, either hunting down more humans to kill and devour, or hunting down any other animals to eat, obviously. But all we know is he has a main goal in his mind. He wants revenge on the human race. But how did he get taken into the demon's realm? Well, ever since the outbreak that happened, Project S was roaming around in the forest, looking for a place to hide. He found a cave. However, when he entered the cave, let's just say the demon showed up and simply snatched him into the demon's realm. Now Project S is trapped into the demon's realm, now going to kill any survivor that dare approach his territory. Alright, the next killer, the chef, also known as Danny the Chef. Now, just to let you know, I actually never wrote his lore, but a friend of mine actually wrote his lore for me. So definitely shout out to my buddy Bradley for writing the lore of Danny the Chef. So there we go. Credit goes to my buddy Bradley. Now we get to talk about the lore of Danny the Chef. So Danny the Chef, or just the Chef, was a normal chef at one point. Until some strange man eventually came to the restaurant he worked at, which was called Danny's. Now, when Danny the chef got curious about the strange man put some kind of curse into Danny, and now Danny is possessed by some kind of demon, or maybe he became one himself. Nowadays, he's been killing innocent people, turning them into, well, meat, causing people to, well, let's just say, he's been feeding the remains of the humans that he cooked to the people that come to his restaurant, as the customers don't realize it. Until, let's just say, there's been some health violation issues that's been going around, and some certain incidents that happen where people have been suffering through basically, basically, they have been suffering through some health issues. So eventually, investigations begin to happen around Danny's. Eventually, they found out what happened, and Danny the chef was on the run. As time went on, Danny's was abandoned, now left forgotten. But however, Danny himself had came back to the restaurant he had abandoned all these years ago. Ever since then, now he still resides in he resides in the restaurant. Um, of course, the restaurant was abandoned, so nothing much really happened there, other than Danny was still killing people while trying to avoid getting caught in the process. The police still are having trouble trying to find Danny and hunt him down. As Danny was doing as usual, one night when Danny was in his restaurant cooking cooking another pair of human meat for himself to eat, a couple individuals encountered Danny the chef. Danny tried to kill them, however, they managed to escape him, and they even managed to get him finally caught by the police, which caused him to be arrested in the process. However, the prison wouldn't hold him for long, as eventually Danny the chef began to evolve, to evolve into a more powerful being. Of course, eventually, Danny the chef escaped prison, trying to hunt down the same people that got him arrested to begin with. Of course, he ended up being led into, well, a cave, where he tried to kill the individuals that got him arrested to begin with. He tried to finish them off. However, when he lunged towards them, the individuals managed to get out of the way, causing Chef to fall into his death, falling into a pile of spikes, which could have been the end of him there. However, it wasn't. Eventually, Danny the Chef had came back to life, now as an even more powerful demon than he already was. Now going out of his way to hunt down, well, the individuals once again. However, that's all I can really tell about Danny the Chef's lore, because again, really his entire lore is written by Bradley. Well, okay, I came up with like some parts of his lore, like just now, like the part where he went hiding and all that and was being hunted down by the police. That part just came up. Everything else about his lore was all made up by my friend Bradley, which is why I credit him and gave him the shout out, because he was the one who wrote most of the lore of Danny the Chef. Yes, sometimes me and my friends tend to write lore for certain OCs of mine. I also want to mention that Project S's lore was also written by Bradley, so pretty much the Danny the Chef and Project S's lore were written by Bradley. So shout out to Bradley. I forgot to mention about that about Project S. Um, Now how did Danny the Chef get kidnapped by the demon of all things? Well, this was during a moment when Danny the Chef tried to kill the individuals. Um, when Danny the Chef was led to the police, when the police tried to arrest him, Chef fought back, but eventually he was overwhelmed by the police. However, the demon showed up and snatched his ass into the demon's realm. Now, the chef is now trapped in the demon's realm, going to kill the survivors, and of course, cook them and eat them. There we go. Next killer, the turkey. Also another thing, his lore was also written by my buddy Bradley. Oh my god, three of my OCs in a row whose lore is written by my buddy Bradley. Again, shout out to Bradley. Um, so the turkey. What is his lore? Well, the turkey is, basically he was just a normal average turkey at one point. However, he ended up becoming an absolute madman. Why did a turkey become a madman and started killing people? It's simple. He was getting sick and tired of his kind being killed, only for them to be turned into meat for people to eat. So now the turkey is going out of its way to kill the humans in order to avenge the other of his kind. So that is pretty much really it for turkey's lore. But how did the turkey get taken into the demon's realm? Well, during the night, the turkey tried to kill a family because during Thanksgiving they were having turkey. And of course, the turkey himself found out and was not very happy. He invaded their home and tried to kill them. However, he did manage to kill pretty much almost all of them. All he needed to do was to kill the last family member, which was the wife of the family. However, before he even had a chance to kill the last family member, the wife, he ended up getting snatched by the demon in the process. Now, the turkey is trapped in the demon's realm, now forced to kill survivors. But he's still angry, so he doesn't give a fuck either way if he's trapped there for eternity or not. Next up, Eyeless Jack, also known as the Eyeless. Um, nothing is known about Eyeless Jack other than he feasts on the kidneys from the humans. And nothing is known about how he got taken to the Demon's Realm either. There hasn't really been any rumors of how Eyeless Jack ended up in the Demon's Realm to begin with. However, all we know is that Eyeless Jack is in the Demon's Realm, and he's going to make sure that you not only die, but he's also going to make sure that he gets to feast on your kidneys. Next up, Creep Man. Creep Man was born in an extremely insane family. A family who are not only just crazy people, but are also serial killers. Creep Man, as time went on, became a serial killer himself, all because of the negative influence that his entire family had upon him. Of course, it started off normal for him. He didn't really kill anyone yet until he was in high school. When he was in high school, he started becoming more and more insane as time went on. After all, he was mentally abused by his family, and not only that, considering his family are serial killers, they pretty much driven him to become one just like them. Which is why, as time went on during high school, he ended up finally going out of his way to start killing people. Eventually, police started looking for him, as he went hiding as time went on once he realized that, yeah, he needs to be on the run. However, as years go by, Creepman has made a return, but no one really knows what his identity is, because now he is wearing armor and is wearing a helmet mask to hide his face entirely. Where did he get this armor from? Well, he killed a military member that worked with a military group, whose leader is Zia. But, of course, Creepman killed an elite soldier, took the elite soldier's armor, and now wears it throughout whenever he's out killing people. However, as time went on, Creepman now grew some kind of new fascination. A fascination of wanting to create a movie, a snuff film, where he is the main focus of the films, killing these innocent people, and he also ends up referring to himself as the Creep Man. However, although that the law is still looking for him, it's really hard to catch him because he is way too good at hiding. Even if the police think that they can finally catch him, turns out he's nowhere near to be seen. Creepman is everywhere. But how did Creepman end up in the Demon's Realm? How did this simple serial killer end up in the Demon's Realm of all things? Well, there was a certain night where he ended up sneaking into a random person's house, as usual. Of course, he gets to a point where he is about to kill the victim. However, unfortunately, Creepman ended up getting caught by the police. In fact, he was caught by police and a detective, Detective Dolan and Officer Arctic. As Officer Arctic and Dolan were about to arrest him, and when the random victim that Cream was about to kill managed to get out to free himself before anything gets bad, Creepman tried to kill both Officer Arctic and Detective Dolan. However, the demon showed up just at the right time, as he kidnapped not only Creepman himself, but also kidnapped Detective Dolan and Officer Arctic. Now, Creepman is trapped in the demon's realm. However, he doesn't really care that he's stuck in there. All he knows is that he knows what he's meant to do in the demon's realm. He is a killer after all. He is going to kill the survivors, especially the two that also got taken into the demon's realm along with him. Which means he's going to have even more fun killing the survivors, because he's also going to kill two certain individuals who won't stop looking for him, Officer Arctic and Detective Dolan. Next killer that ended up in the demon's realm, Krampus? The fuck is that son of a bitch doing here? Anyways, so Krampus is known for one thing and one thing only: punishing naughty children in a more gruesome way. those who are extremely naughty, and of course, as always, whenever Christmas arrives, instead of the naughty children receiving gifts, they get punished. Not with coal, no, worse. However, it's also unknown to how Krampus ended up getting taken by the demon in the first place. How did the demon somehow get a hold of him? Nothing is known to how that even happened. All we know is that he's here to punish us in the demon's realm. That's it. Alright. And the last killer to talk about for part 1 of this lore dropping Game of Death nonsense shenanigans, we got the Seeker, also known as Seek from Doors. Yes, Seek from a Roblox game Doors is in Game of Death. Now, what is his lore? What is Seek's lore? Um, Seek doesn't really have a lore in the actual game Doors itself. However, in Game of Death, there is a reason to how he ended up in the demon's realm. There is a point where Seek was chasing after someone who was in the hotel. However, Seek was actually getting up on someone that was trying to escape him. When Seek got close, the demon shows up at the last second, snatches Seek, and traps him in the demon's realm. Now Seek is trapped in the demon's realm. However, that's not going to stop him from hunting down anyone. And that's just about it for the lore dropping of how each of the killers ended up in the demon's realm, and of course their origins as well, their origin stories. Um, yeah, that's just about it for, well, that this is part 1 of each of the killers in the demon's realm. Well, in Game of Death, their origins and how they ended up in the demon's realm to begin with. I'm Boot Subway Studios. Catch you all next time, and I'll hopefully see you guys in part 2. Peace.